Hey, welcome to the Ask a Pastor podcast. We are experimenting with a little bit of a new format here, spending more time going into one subject and just having a little bit more fun, being a little bit more casual. So today we're going to explore the subject that you've all been waiting for, Kanye.
Dun, dun, dun.
But before we jump into that, since we're talking about music, why don't you share, Kurt, what are you listening to these days?
What am I listening to? I've been listening to Slaughter Beach Dog.
Okay.
It's one of the things my sons have gotten me into. So I actually took Nate, my youngest son, to a Slaughter Beach Dog concert the other night. And I was actually probably the oldest person in the room. But it was really cool. They're one of these bands that isn't well known. So we were standing right on the stage, like my hands were on the stage, and as we were there. So that's kind of fun when you get that close to somebody.
Wow.
So I'd been listening to their music a little bit just because my kids were into it, but then after going to the concert, I've been listening.
Is like a
It's like-
independent type of band, or what is it?
I'd call it a indie rock,
Yeah.
alternative.
Electric or acoustic
No,
stuff?
I mean, they
a
have
blend.
electric guitars, but
Yeah.
it's
That's cool.
they're fun. A lot of that's probably not a recommendation if you have young kids, but because there are a lot of drug and alcohol references.
Yeah.
But what was actually cool is it gave me a chance to talk about that with my son,
Right.
saying, "Okay, you like this music. Let's talk about how often drugs and alcohol are used as a reference."
Yeah.
And what the context is and how this plays out. So
That's
yeah,
actually
it was
cool.
it was an interesting
Yeah.
conversation. At first he was like, "Oh, Dad, come on." But it's like, well, okay, I went to the concert with you, and probably half the songs felt like they had some clear reference to drug use or alcohol.
Yeah.
And so it ended up leading to a good conversation.
Yeah.
And
I've done the
so-
same with my kids. I've always said it's I want to insulate my kids, but not isolate my kids. Like you want your kids to be able to they're going to have to be independent and out there in the world anyhow. So, for them to be able to listen to whatever they want to listen to, but wrestle with the ideas, not just intake it, I think is important. So I do the same
Yeah.
thing with my kids,
So Joel, what have you been listening to?
Yeah, man.
I am
Wait, we know. Something country.
Yes!
What, Lithuania?
I love country. What?
Lithuania, I said? That's a country.
I love country music, and
Do you really?
You didn't
Last
know
And
that?
you
year-
admit that publicly?
absolutely.
Yeah,
And I
okay.
hated it when I was a kid, growing up in a place where everybody listened to country.
Yeah.
But we went to this Luke Bryan concert like a year
Yeah,
ago,
yeah,
right?
great.
Accidentally, sort of. And we come back, and Kurt, in one of his messages, rips on Sunrise, Sunburn, Sunset, Repeat. And I'm in the back of the room just like, yeah, that's my jam. So Dan,
Yeah.
you're not working. You're just listening to music for fun. You're not trying to
Yeah.
find a new worship song. What are you listening to?
Well, I am really eclectic. So I actually still have an iPod, and actually I just dug up my old iPod that was like 80 gigabytes of music. So I put it on random, and I would say that random is really my listening taste.
Oh, yeah?
I listen to everything from flat picking bluegrass to country to classical music to jazz and all sorts of jazz, into the really heavy stuff. I'd say I'm not as in tune with the pop music today, but a lot of times I'll just put on the radio and listen to it because, in my world, I need to know what people are doing because
Yeah.
I play on people's records and stuff. And then also, we do stuff here and you want to know what the bleeding edge is, where
So if
people
I
are going.
asked you if you like the new Lizzo tone,
I don't
tune,
know
you would
it.
say I don't know it.
I don't know it. Yeah,
all
sorry.
All right.
So, yeah, so I listen to a little bit of everything though, and I really enjoy all types of music.
Yeah.
So, I know we're going to talk about Kanye today. The one type of music that I don't know much about is rap music, actually, and I've just never really gotten into it too much. So,
Yeah.
I'm not an expert in rap.
I have, just over the past couple of weeks been listening to this album, and I really have enjoyed it, which has been
Yeah.
surprising to me. So,
Well, there's not a lot of rap on it.
okay.
It's
I don't know
not
what that
country.
means. It's not country. Yeah.
Did you know Kurt was a really good rapper?
No.
Yeah, nobody does it.
Yeah, that's right.
not true.
That's not true. Yeah.
So let's get into this. Kanye obviously has had this conversion experience and is redefining himself as somebody who's not going to play secular music anymore. He's only going to play gospel music. Kurt, what's your initial reaction to just having seen this in the news?
In terms of just his saying, "I'm not going to do other music," or
Sure. Yeah,
overall,
let's go there.
Yeah, because I hadn't heard that. I didn't know that he was
I hadn't
actually
heard that
had
either.
made that
Okay.
turn. I had heard him say, like, I'm an artist who's Christian, but not necessarily a Christian artist. Like,
Gotcha.
everything I do is Christian,
That's
sort
right.
of because he's a Christian. So,
That was a
but I didn't
Jimmy
realize
Kimmel
that. Yeah,
thing,
right.
I mean, certainly it brings positive attention to Christianity. I mean, dropping an album called Jesus is King is cool. Just that somebody who didn't necessarily espouse that 5 years ago is saying, I've had a change of life and I want to celebrate that and I want it to be part of my music, part of my life.
Yeah.
I see that as something to be celebrated.
Yeah, interesting. I had somebody a week ago, a friend said to me, you know, how ironic is it that the #1 best-selling album in the world is called Jesus is King right now? Like that's a substantial thing.
Yeah.
What about you, Dan? What do you think about just his turn from playing?
Well, hey, you know, we're all about the gospel. So, like, if somebody genuinely has a conversion experience, comes to Christ, man, I mean, what's not to like about that, right? So I feel like that's as positive a thing as you can possibly have. Now, we don't know what the end of this thing is going to be, but man, I am thankful for it. I'm thankful for what's happening. It sounds like he's a part of a good church that's teaching really solid foundational Christianity, and you know, hopefully
I heard
he's
he
surrounded.
started his own church.
I don't know.
And I don't know I didn't research that.
Yeah,
but I
he had
heard
moved recently, so that could well be the case.
Okay.
You know, that gives you a little bit of pause just because of how long he's been a
Somebody
Christian.
told me he's got like 17,000 people coming.
I think that was a church that he was already a part of.
Oh, was he already a part
He
of?
was at least under some sort of pastoral leadership.
Okay.
Yeah, and I actually watched like a video with the pastor on, it was some blog called Wretched. Guy's a pretty solid guy, and he was interviewing the pastor, and the pastor was just great. I mean, he said all the right stuff, in my estimation. You know, it was really solid biblically. All the foundational biblical stuff was really right on. So, you know, I was thankful that Kanye is part of a church like that, you know?
One of the things that I think we heard a lot of people saying when before the album came out, when he first talked about his conversion, people were saying, is this just a hoax just to like sell more albums? What do you guys think of that?
That's a bad hoax if it is.
That's
because
true.
Becoming a Christian artist typically it doesn't
Although
bode
it is
well.
#1 in the world.
Right.
So,
it
so
did,
in that sense,
did do
if it
pretty
was a
well.
hoax,
it was a good hoax. Yeah, right.
Yeah. What's your take on that?
You know, I think that would be a really hard hoax to keep up. At least when I listen to the album and I listen to the lyrics, and maybe he's just consulting somebody else that is, you know, feeding these lyrics. Like it seems real. It doesn't seem like someone who has this, you know, facade of Christianity. Like he's preaching lyrics that are, you know, that get to the heart of what I think Christianity is. And saying things like, you know, I was a servant to the devil and now I'm not. And, you know, caring about his one song is Closed on Sundays, and he talks about like protecting the family and raising up sons and daughters in the faith. And that to me just feels too genuine for me to question whether or not it's real or not.
Yeah.
Well, you do have to ask a question like, why? I mean, what would be the motivation for him? I really don't think it would be that he thought it was going to go to #1 because he released a Christian record. You know, I don't know that would be the case because typically artists who have gone that direction, it's gone the other way for them. So you do have to ask, like, what could be behind it other than something that he genuinely heartfelt? You know, it's almost like, to me, you know, I've heard a lot of people argue like the writers of the Bible, the apostles, you know, they were making up these stories. And I always say, why would they do that? And they say, well, it's for power. And I said, well, you know, as I read the Bible, they didn't get any power. They got persecution. They all got killed, you know? I mean, that was the hardest choice that they could have made. If anything, that sort of verifies their faith to me, that they were willing to look in the eyes of the fire and say, I'm willing to go through this because what I believe is true. You know, I saw it happen. So
that's right.
I'd say with Kanye, you know, that's what it seems like to me, is he's had a genuine conversion, and he's, you know, he's an artist, and he puts out music, and he wants to put out music that reflects what happened in his heart. You know?
Yeah. Questioning somebody's conversion from a distance is always dangerous, in my estimation. At the same time, I think Christians can be irresponsible with celebrity. And what I mean by that is when a celebrity all of a sudden articulates faith, we give the person a bigger platform than their spiritual maturity would suggest. In the New Testament, we're told that somebody who's taking leadership in a church should not be a recent convert.
Yeah.
And certainly, we're not suggesting Kanye's taking leadership in a church if he's going to a church and all of that. But in the broader church, what happens is celebrity becomes a de facto voice of authority. And so sometimes what happens is we'll listen to somebody because they're a celebrity on spiritual matters that probably we'd be wise to be cautious to give them that much sway. And I'm not speaking even specifically here about Kanye, but just saying. So I think it's possible to say, on one hand, awesome, I have no reason to question anything, and just celebrate what God appears to have done. But that doesn't mean that now every view Kanye has should be considered right next to people who have studied their lifetime and gone through the process of being recognized by the church, ordained, studying at a seminary, those kinds of things that have been traditional markers for somebody to speak with authority for a community. And so I think there would be some wisdom there to having caution while at the same time celebration.
And that's exactly where I went. 1 Timothy 3:6. He must not be a recent convert, or he may be puffed up with conceit.
Without knowing.
I know, and fall into the condemnation of the devil. And I just think that puffed up with conceit thing is a really big part of that. When you have someone like, take Justin Bieber, who like all of a sudden is like put in the spotlight, like this guy's a new convert, like he represents Christianity. That's exactly the concern in the church, is you have somebody who's new representing Christianity, and that's the position that he's in. I don't envy him for that reason.
Right, no, because the scrutiny now will be intense for him. Everything he says or does, he will get criticized from both sides. He'll get Christians who say, well, you're not Christian enough because you don't believe the jot and tittles that I believe or practice the way I do. And then you'll have people in the secular culture who will say, oh, you're now X or Y because of everything that you've stated.
Nice use of the word jot and tittle, by the way.
That's
Thank
right.
you.
Nice job on that.
I just had to throw that in.
Nice work. I've never heard that before. Some of my favorite foods. I think too, like for me, if I was when I was a brand new Christian, if people would have just unfolded my life publicly, that would have been an awful thing for me. So my heart goes out to Kanye. That is a really rough thing. Like when I came to Christ, my life was genuinely changed. It genuinely took a turn. But man, God was still working a lot of stuff out in my life, and he still is. All these years later, it's not like he's gotten everything, I've gotten everything right or something. So doing that under the public eye and public scrutiny, especially on that level of stage, I think that's a really difficult thing.
Yeah.
And I feel, I don't feel bad for him. I don't even know what the word is, but there's.
He is used to being in the public eye.
He is, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, he did marry a Kardashian. Is that right?
Is that right, Joel?
I've heard of that. I don't know.
Do you know her?
And so, have you seen Keeping Up with the Kardashians?
I've not. I've never seen it.
Have you?
Wow, no, I have not. All right, so we have nothing to comment. Josh, have you seen it?
One of my favorite shows to keep on the DVR.
Oh, he says
Josh
it's his favorite.
has seen Keeping Up with the Kardashians, but
Up with the Kardashians.
my guess is that if you marry somebody who's putting their whole life on there,
right,
that you're at least comfortable with being in the public eye for everything. But there is going to be something that'll change.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like Anne Rice, who was an author. She wrote like all these vampire books and stuff, and she ended up becoming a Christian. And it was kind of interesting the way she became a Christian, actually. I think she was doing, she's like a really research-heavy type of person, so like a James Michener type of person, where when she does her books, if she places them in Poland in 1800 or something like that, she'll research a lot for it. So I think she was researching around the time of Christ. Maybe she was doing it for like, vampires in Jerusalem or something like that. I don't know. But anyhow, she started, as she was researching, she gave her life to Christ. It sounded like a genuine conversion. She ended up writing a couple of books that were about Jesus. A little bit questionable on that. She was, again, a new convert. But she felt so much scrutiny from the church. It was just, it was a lot of pain for her. And she ended up, I think, really renouncing her faith in the last number of years.
Wow.
So, my prayer for Kanye is that he wouldn't get beat up by us too much, too. Because, we can be extraordinarily critical. The word says, Jesus said, they'll know us by our love. But man, you know, it seems like so often in the church we're known not by our love, but by our criticism of each other and our divisions, you know?
Well, if you want to be criticized, go to work at a church.
Yeah, right.
And or become a public Christian figure.
Yes.
I mean, what's Lauren Daigle is another good example. I mean, she's a
Yeah,
singer.
right.
I mean, she's criticized for what she wears, how
Yeah.
she sings, what she I mean, everything in her
Yes.
life. It's like you can find somebody who's got an opinion.
Yes.
And so certainly that's part of and I think that's part of why there's the idea of not a recent convert. You don't want somebody to get so disheartened with it, and that may have been some
Yeah.
of what happened with Anne Rice,
Yeah.
where just got disheartened with having people, you know, kind of pick at everything. But again,
Yeah.
that's part and parcel of the celebrity and raising up a celebrity to say now they represent something that maybe they weren't ready to fully represent.
Yeah, that's true.
Can I throw some Kanye lyrics out here?
Sure.
So this is from the song Hands On, and on the subject of how the church reacts to watching this happen publicly, he writes, I've been working for you that was the devil one. I've been working for you my whole life, told the devil that I'm going on strike. He later said, I'm finna do a gospel album. What have you been hearing from the Christians? They'll be the first one to judge me, make it feel like nobody loved me. Told people God was my mission. What have you been hearing from the Christians? They'll be the first one to judge me, make it feel like nobody loved me. What's your reaction to that?
You know, there's two sides of it. One is you feel like a certain level of shame with Christianity and how, you know, it can be really petty, it can be really judgmental. I mean, we see that all the time. You know, I mean, you just do a Google search where there's a comment section on something about any sort of Christian question and read the comments. Some of them get very caustic and very ugly. Yeah. And you go like, man, really, this is supposed to be a representative of Christ. On the other side, we are supposed to be workman approved, and the truth is the final arbiter of things. Now, I know there's some areas where there's gray areas, but you know, on the core truths of Christianity, you have to be dogmatic. You just have to be. You can't let those things go. Yeah. So there's certain things where, you know, if you're talking about, you know, the Trinity or the deity of Christ or something, you have to be dogmatic about it. Yeah. You know, you have to hold your ground. And there is that arbiter of truth where you have to say, no, if you cross this line, you've crossed over into another zone that is not really Orthodox Christianity. You know, so I think that's a caution for that. So, you know, if he's getting critiques from Christians, he probably should bring them to his pastor or somebody that he really trusts and says, what do you think about these? Are these legit or illegit? And hopefully that guy has enough understanding, biblical background to be able to say, well, this thing, you should be cautious on what you're saying here because this can really be taken wrong. But these things, these are in-house debates. You don't have to worry about how caustic people are being with you. You know, just keep plowing ahead type of thing. You know?
That's true.
Another thing strikes me, and again, I don't know that this fits Kanye specifically, but one of the ways to avoid scrutiny is to claim that you're being judged. And to say, oh, as soon as I'm judged, you're judging me, therefore you can't say anything. And there's a both end. So he's right in a sense to say, I'm sure I'll get judged and to have a legitimate concern and distaste for it. But at the same time, I think it's okay for there to be legitimate scrutiny and not just to say, I'm being judged. And so if you are public or in ministry, like one of the things I know I have to do is when people will critique or give suggestions for something at the church, is ask the question, is there truth in it? Not just, you're judging me and I'm done. I don't listen. I need to say, what is there in this that is legitimate that I can hear and learn from? And it's interesting with our teaching that goes out on radio and internet and stuff. We'll get emails from people, random, different places, and who will
Really?
who will, are like self-appointed.
Yeah, right.
And sometimes you'll respond a few times and then say, okay, look, I'm not going to keep responding all the time. But my point is that it would be easy just to say, oh, judging, instead of saying, let me hear. And I hope for Kanye's sake that he does both, that he can say, there's time, as you said, Dan, to plow ahead, to say this is not something I need to be concerned about, but that he'll also say, but what is legitimate in some of the critique that might get thrown my way. What do you see in the lyrics, Joel, of that?
It makes me sad, to be honest, just that I think, when when somebody becomes a believer and they say that they've become a believer, I think the church just needs to get behind them and cheer them on. And when I say cheer them on, I don't mean go out and buy his album. I just mean encourage him. And I guess it's not here. It's at the end of the song. He says, I deserve all the criticism you got. To sing of change, you think I'm joking. To praise his name, you ask what I'm smoking. Yes, I understand your reluctancy, yeah, but I have a request, you see. Don't throw me up. Lay your hands on me. Please pray for me. And that was convicting to me, just that like our response to him, he's asking for it, needs to be to pray for him. I mean, he's got a difficult road ahead to be.
He had that humility in there too to say, my life has not been perfect. When he spotted that.
Which is so against Kanye's personality.
Is it really?
Right? I mean, he's generally, putting himself in the spotlight. I'm the man. So to say I deserve all the criticism, I don't know. That points to some real change.
Yeah, and what you were saying, I think your first response to emails that come in that might seem critical of stepping back and saying, okay, is there truth in this? Because all of our first natural defenses are saying, this person's just being critical, exactly what you were saying. But the scripture you brought up earlier, the Timothy scripture, it talks about that you're not puffed up. It's not, pride is a real issue. And if you do just say, they're just judging me and I'm going to say what I want to say type of thing, well, you never get to the heart of saying, okay, is there a truth issue here that goes beyond just an interpretation issue?
Yeah. All right, so I want to hear from both of you. Would you sing? I mean, setting aside the fact that it's rap, and that would probably make a lot of people uncomfortable to try to sing along with it in our setting. Would you play one of his songs during a service?
Yeah, so I actually listened to a bunch of the record before I knew we were going to talk about this. And the reason I would listen to it, first of all, I do try to listen to new stuff that's out there, but I was actually listening, like fishing, seeing like, is there anything good on this? This guy's putting
usable.
out, he's putting out a high budget record. Yeah, it's people, they're going to know it, and it's going to be well done because he's put the money behind it to get the right people involved and stuff. So it's going to be a good project. And so my question was, is there anything here that was usable for us? So.
Okay.
And did you find anything?
There was one possible one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so the rest of it, according to Dan, is not very good?
Well, no. It's not that. It's the doability. You have to ask the question, if it's got a big gospel choir, we just don't have that, so can we do it? If it's got a big rap section, I know you can rap, but who else on our staff can rap?
You.
Me, I'm the guy.
You can rap.
You do not want to hear that. You don't want to see me dance. You don't want to hear me rap.
A lot of the songs sort of tell his own story.
Right.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't play correctly. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I wouldn't hesitate to do a song
from
it, from what I know today. I do think when it comes to music that there's a both and to saying evaluate the music and the source.
Okay. You guys have axed some bands, right?
We've taken some things out of rotation.
Okay.
Or we're not doing some things that other churches do that are like us do freely. And so I think you want to be careful not to always just simply say, well, I don't like that source, we'll never do anything, because I think music can stand on its own. But in this case, I wouldn't be concerned about the source at the moment. Yeah. I would say that's, he's coming in a new place, and if somebody's just had a conversion, I'd be more concerned if in 5 years there's some doctrinal errors and things that have crept in. Then I might say, not as much. And so in that sense, that would be there. But yeah, I right now wouldn't hesitate. How about you?
I think I'm with you in that I wouldn't hesitate today, because you have to act on the information that you have. You make a good point that you do have to consider both the source and the content, because so this weekend, and it'll be past by the time this airs. He's going to Joel Osteen's church, which is like the beachhead of prosperity gospel in America, right? I think America's largest church that preaches a prosperity gospel.
You heard it here. Joel just called Joel the beachhead.
Yeah, right.
The prosperity gospel in America. Okay.
Is that not true?
I'm just saying. It was Joel's comment on Joel.
Oh no.
Joel on Joel. Yeah, I like that.
Drives me crazy.
That's a fair critique.
people, when I sometimes meet them for the first time,
Why are you
they're at
judging
a
him?
church,
You're making him feel like he's not loved.
they'll hear my name and they'll be like, oh, like Joel Osteen, I love him. And they'll go on about how much they listen to Joel Osteen. And I'm thinking, you're not going to come to this church for very long. So I guess let me ask this question. What should the church's response be? What should Christians' response be who believe strongly in the gospel, who see the prosperity gospel as an error, if Kanye like really aligns himself with Joel Osteen in that movement?
You know, one good thing, I did just watch that, as I mentioned, a podcast with his pastor, who's currently his pastor, and this guy, it was only 20 minutes of talk, I think, but this guy to me seemed extremely solid. So,
Okay.
You know, there's a good possibility that they'll probably have some compelling conversations that, you know, hopefully he'll be able to see and discern those things.
Yeah.
For him, that's a big stage, you know, and that might be part of it. I don't know. Maybe he was asked to be there, is my guess, you know, that Joel Osteen's church actually asked him to be there. But again, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
I guess it goes to a larger question of how do Christians respond to someone who's sort of a public figure, celebrity, who claims Christianity, but there's something in their theology that's like way off. Like who is the presidential candidate?
I was going to say, you have the same issue right now with Paula White being an advisor to Donald Trump.
Okay.
Paula White is another well-known prosperity teacher who, you know, here at Orchard Hill, we'd say we don't believe probably a good chunk of what she espouses.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, you know, she's sitting in the White House advising Donald Trump.
Right.
And so, yeah, how does that impact how you see something is a fair question. So how do you respond to Kanye going to Lakewood?
I think and I'm thinking of the presidential candidate who's a Seventh-day Adventist.
Oh, okay.
Like we have to make those decisions probably. Well, that's I guess a much larger conversation in terms of, you know, how do you decide who you vote for, but. I would say, you know, having a segment of their theology that's way out in left field probably doesn't disqualify them from, you know, being a person that you vote for. But with Kanye, I think he'd probably treat him the same way you treat anybody else who's who you disagree with theologically. That you keep the good, you celebrate the good, and you mourn the bad. And I don't know, I guess there's a difference between somebody who's, there have been prosperity gospels preachers that we've looked at and said, I'm not even sure if this person understands the gospel. Like, do they really know Jesus, or is this all about, you know, the money or something else? And that's different than somebody who sort of just gets swept along in the movement, who does love the Lord, who does, you know, they're honestly seeking him. So I think the responses to those are different. And one you probably regard as a false teacher, and the other you regard as somebody who's, you know, sort of being strung along by a false teacher.
Yeah, and maybe this is more nuanced than we need, but there's nuance to false teachers in that, you know, if you listen to anybody long enough, there's probably something you disagree with.
Yes.
And you wouldn't say, well, false teacher, I disagree with that.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, you know, even to put that moniker down, I'm not even sure when the tipping point is in terms of saying, oh, now they're a false teacher.
Absolutely.
And we shouldn't listen to them at all. Because I think there are people, even in the prosperity camp, who I wouldn't agree with, that I wouldn't want to put that label on. And then there are some in that camp that I would say, that's probably fair. And I don't know that I've thought through exactly where the tipping point is, and I don't know that it's a good answer to say, you'll know it when you see it in that. But so even within the prosperity movement in Kanye, there's probably a difference in even where he might align himself.
And you know, again, if you do a Google search on any famous teacher and just put in their name and the words false teacher, you will get hits. You know, Billy Graham is the Antichrist type of stuff, where you really do have to question and say, like, man, there's some really harsh critiques out there. Where is that line? And one of the things that I think is can be overly harsh, because I've seen this time and time again, is guilt by association. So, somebody, Kanye plays at somebody's church and then, he's thrown under the bus because of it. But I've seen teachers that I really respect who have shared the stage. Like Ravi Zacharias is a guy that I like to listen to. And, he shared the stage with some people who, would disagree theologically on some very significant issues. And then I've seen all of a sudden, Ravi Zacharias, false teacher because
He
had
hung out with these people.
Yeah,
right?
he was on the same stage. Well, that's a pretty harsh criticism rather than criticizing them for their own beliefs and their theology.
Yeah.
Well, and there is something to, if you share a stage with somebody, you are to a degree endorsing them. Not entirely, because you're not saying I believe in everything, but
Sure.
there is something that you're saying, okay, we're enough here to, and you would like people to discern, but they don't always in terms of that. But it's also, unfair when somebody says because you have been near this person, you must believe all they believe or endorse all that they are, rather than saying, hey, I'm willing, because otherwise you'd never share a stage with anybody at some point, because you would say, well, we disagree on the 15th point of this minor doctrine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's different if you invited somebody to be on stage here at the church. That really is an endorsement to a certain degree.
That's bigger endorsement than me going somewhere.
Right. There needs to be some discernment in that. You don't want to be caught off guard and have them say something that is really unexpected on stage. So you need to know some background. But like you've spoken at a number of places where there's a lot of different teachers, and you might not fully agree with all the other teachers. But you're not endorsing them just because you're speaking to an audience.
No, that's right.
All right, so we're going to move on to a new segment here. That's some rapid fire questions. And as we pivot to that, I want to ask this question. Very briefly, should Christians even care when celebrities become Christians?
Yes, absolutely. One of the reasons why Kanye's out there, he's speaking to an audience that maybe has never heard about Christianity very much in a very clear or compelling way. He can be a light in the darkness in areas that other Christian voices might never be able to hit. But in the same way, the guy who got converted, who hangs out down at the local bar and goes to his buddies and starts sharing Jesus, we should celebrate him in a similar way. So there's nothing special in God's eyes about Kanye or anybody else who has celebrity, but he does have a fairly large platform.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful if he's sharing Jesus. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
To a degree, yes. I don't think it's worthy of being obsessed with, but I think because of the influence, it's a story and people will talk about it. So to have a well-informed idea about it is worthwhile.
That's true. Yeah.
What would you say?
I would say yes, but we care too much, I think. I think we get too wrapped up in oh, look, guys, Christianity is actually cool because Kanye's doing
like an
it.
endorsement.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I mean, let's not fool ourselves. We worship a guy who was crucified. And what we believe, it's a little bit crazy that he rose from the dead. And so we should expect that culture's not going to wrap its hands around that and say, we love it. So.
Yeah, and it doesn't make it more real because somebody who is famous endorses that.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, more questions here. This one says, I have seen videos on YouTube, particularly Bethel Church and Upper Room, that are titled Spontaneous Worship. What is spontaneous worship, and is it biblical?
That sounds like a Dan question.
All right.
It's not really. There's a couple things to this. I think you have to ask what's the meaning behind the question. If your meaning, which probably would be Bethel's take on this, is that you're led by the Holy Spirit in a certain way, because the Holy Spirit's saying you need to do this chorus again and you're going to have a breakthrough and some people are going to have a healing. You have to be cautious with that, I'd say. Could that be true? Absolutely. The Holy Spirit leads people, and He should. When you speak, you should. Sometimes God might place things on your heart that you didn't prepare, and you say, and that's okay. That's what your job is. I think, to be honest with you, though, just the craft of music, just to be very blunt, I think oftentimes it's less that than it is somebody seeing where a room's going and they're just feeling the feel of the room. And sometimes, there's basically I've often told people here, you have your rock and roll performance, which is you perform the song exactly like the recording was. When you go and see a rock and roll band, you want to hear the identical recording of it. And then you have jazz, where you don't want to hear the identical recording, you want to hear something totally different. So, you know, there's some excitement when people are doing something free on stage. And as far as being biblical, sure, no problem at all, as long as you're not adhering too much to some of the theological mysticism that's behind it.
Yeah. All right, let's do one more sort of theology question, and then I'm going to ask you both another question. This is, I have grown up in the Baptist church, in the Baptist church in which we did not drink or go to bars. What is your opinion of Christians drinking or going to bars?
I think that you should answer that question.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem with Christians drinking or going to bars. Jesus turned water into wine, and no matter.
So was it fruit juice?
It was fruit juice that was fermented. So obviously, there's a lot of care that needs to happen there, and that can very easily grow into an addiction. It can grow into something that people use to deal with stress and anxiety, and of course, drinking too much is a problem. So, anything else on?
Dan?
That's it. No, I'd agree wholeheartedly with that. And I think the Bible has admonitions against alcohol. It has some very severe ones, especially in the book of Proverbs. But it also, you know, Psalm 104, it talks about God gave wine for the gladness of men's heart.
Yeah.
You know, and like you said, you know, Jesus turned water into wine, and he himself said, "This is my blood, wine." And we could go into some deeper stuff on that, but I don't think the Bible says don't drink alcohol. I think the Bible says do not get drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, that part's clear. I think the argument that sometimes people will make is the argument about the weaker brother.
Yeah.
The whole idea
Right.
of does your participation encourage
Yeah.
somebody else toward addiction? Which a lot of times I feel like when somebody makes that argument, if they can articulate that they're the weaker brother or they're concerned about the weaker brother, they probably are not. Because at that point they're using the text as a club to a certain extent to say we want you to live like we live, and now we're appealing to this.
Yeah.
At the same time, it can be a legitimate concern to say, you know, Christian culture has moved just in the last 15 years, I would say. Not that it wasn't part of the culture before, but 15, 20 years ago, people wouldn't have all sat around saying, hey, not nowhere, but it wasn't as common that Christians would say, let's go out and drink, or let's have a drink, you know, what's going on. And I think it's like anything, it was a good pendulum swing to say, let's not act like alcohol is bad when it is not sinful. Let's name drunkenness, and let's say that that's the issue, because it is. So let's accept it and talk about it instead of people sneaking around or whatever they were doing. But sometimes the pendulum can swing so far then the other way that you're not asking any of the questions about the culture, about the environments, about addictions, about weaker brothers. And I think that that what you'll end up seeing is 10, 15 years from now, the pendulum will come back a little bit again, because people will say, okay, maybe we got too loose and have actually encouraged some things that weren't healthy. And again, I think it was a right swing to come away from the, you know, bars are bad, drinking's bad, people who drink are bad. But now it's almost, you know, you can be in a Christian environment and feel awkward if you're not drinking. And I don't know that that's positive either.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Maybe next time we'll tackle the weed question and see if we can disagree. So lastly, give us something that's coming up here at the church that you're excited about, that you want people to know about.
Well, we're on the edge of Christmas, so that's always a really exciting time. And I'd say the thing about Christmas that's exciting for me is not just, in my mind, it's not the big show. You know, that's not what it's all about. Like I've had for 20 years, my family, who are mostly like from a Catholic background, have come and they've been a part of the services. And, you know, I'm thankful that year after year they're hearing the gospel. And I'm excited because people invite friends that they normally wouldn't invite to church, and those friends actually show up to church and they get to hear the good news about Jesus. So that's something I'm really excited about.
Yeah, certainly Christmas ahead of us is always a great time. And then I'm excited for the new year too. I think New Year tends to be a time when people who have maybe become disengaged in church often say, well, let's re-engage. And that's just a great time to see people say, hey, I'm jumping back in and see what God's doing. How about for you, Joel?
I would actually say the Vision 2020 events, I mean, they're sort of underway right now, but also extend through the end of the year. And just giving people the opportunity some people for the first time to ask God, what do you want me to do with my resources? That is hugely powerful in someone's life. And so I just get excited about that from a spiritual growth perspective to see people take that first step. So,
Okay.
Good. Well, that's it. Send in your questions to Ask a Pastor. We'd love to continue to answer those in the rapid fire section, or if they're super good, we'll spend a half hour digging into them.